Hey, what is up guys? Kalem or KalemsFishtanks, and in today's video, I'm super excited to be filling up this tank behind me. In my last video, you guys saw me do the scape, and I've been dry starting it for a couple weeks now, and I'm pretty happy with how things are going, but there's starting to be a couple little issues, so I think it's time to finally fill this thing up. This morning I went out and got a whole bunch of plants, and I'm super excited to get this thing scaped and show you guys the results. So the first issue I'm running into with this dry start method is one little patch of plants has started dying. I don't really know why, but it shouldn't be too much of a problem. There's a little bit of mold in there, a couple little patches. This is something I'm also not that worried about. You know, it would go away when I filled it up with water, but the final thing that is a little worrisome that I'm gonna try to get rid of as much as possible before I do the rest of the planting and fill this tank up is there started to be a little bit of cyanobacteria in the substrate. This is an algae I've never dealt with before, and I've heard a lot of people have a lot of problems with this stuff, so I am a little bit scared, so I'm gonna try my best to get rid of that before it becomes a problem. So now that that's all done, I used some tweezers to remove any cyanobacteria I could. Most of it came out pretty easy, and I could just kind of stick the tweezers in the clumps of mold and they'd all come out. So now I'm gonna really mist down the substrate. I wanna get it really damp, so it's gonna make it a lot easier to plant the plants. When the substrate's really wet, the aqua soil won't really get stuck on the tweezers and it has less of a chance of coming up. So I'm gonna do that just to make planting a little bit easier. Initially I wanted to have just a plain foreground, but I think I'm going to add a little bit of spice to it, make it a little bit of a mixed foreground. So now we've got some water pooled up that I can at least clean off my tweezers in, and we're gonna start over here with the Lilaeopsis brasiliensis. So Lilaeopsis brasiliensis has a pretty interesting scientific name. It's also called pygmy chainsword, which is a lot easier, and as you can see, it basically sends out these little runners and grows out everywhere like that. Surprisingly, it's one of the more easy plants to grow low tech. If you want to get a nice grassy carpet, this is definitely one I recommend. It's one of my favorites, and it's one I have had a lot of success with low tech. A couple other ones are Marsilia crenata and Marsilia hirsuta, but this one's one of my favorites. It's just easy and looks really great. This is my second time ever trying this plant, and this time I'm testing it out in a high-tech tank, which I'm a little worried about. I don't know how fast this stuff is gonna grow, but we're gonna test it out and see how it goes. You know, if it's too fast, I can always take it out. If it starts taking over the other carpet, it doesn't have to be in there permanently, and that's one of the fun things about planted tanks. You can always switch around the plants, and that'll give your scape a whole new look. So the chainsword is done. I threw it in a couple little random areas around here. You can see some down beside that rock there, and I put it mainly over in this area. I've got quite a bit that I think will carpet out. There's a little bit in back behind there that's hard to see, and a little bit way at the back right behind that rock. But it'll all grow out, and I think it'll look super good eventually, if I can keep up with it, of course. But now on to the next plant, which is Lobelia cardinalis mini. This is a plant I've never used in one of my own scapes, but I used it in the tank setup I did for the guys over at Adviton. It's a very, very pretty plant species, and one I've wanted to use forever in one of my tanks. So today I decided to get 2 pots of it, and I'm gonna fill up like this whole side of the tank with it, which I think will look super cool, especially grown out, and I should be able to trim it and get a decent shape out of it. So I'm super excited about that. So that's now done. I'm super excited for how this is going to turn out. This is probably one of the plants I'm going to be the most excited for in this tank. There's also Riccardia camdrifolia, which I haven't tried in forever. But so far it's looking a little green. You know, all the plants are green in here. So over here in this corner, we're gonna spice it up a little bit with some red. So this next one, I kinda just bought because I want redemption with this plant. I've never had success with it before. I've tried it many, many times. It usually grows well for a little bit and then kind of falls off after a while. And this is Alternanthera reineckii mini. I don't know what it is. Maybe there's something in my tap water, but I've never tried it under Chihiros lights before. That's what I'm using on this tank. It's the Chihiros WRGB 2. An amazing light, super powerful, super great color. So we're gonna see how it does. Maybe it's something in my tap water that prevents me from having success with it, or maybe my setups just weren't good enough, but we're gonna find that out with this setup, and that's why I'm trying this stuff again. This whole back area here, the plan is to have a whole bunch of different kinds of red plants. It's not just gonna be this AR Mini. I'm also going to do a mixed background of Rotala Vietnam H-Raw, which will get red under this light for sure, with nitrogen limitation, as well as Ludwigia palustris red, which is a super easy red plant that will get red no problem. The planting is now done, and I'm gonna start filling it up. When I fill up tanks, I've got a very slow way of doing things. I kind of grab a cup and do it cup by cup because I've messed up a lot of scapes while filling them up, and this gives me a chance to replant things. So I do things really slow. It's kind of like a little bit of a meditation, but I know a lot of people don't have the patience for that, so I'm not going to record any of it. Okay, so the tank is filled up. I'm actually really happy with how it turned out. I've got the CO2 on there now, the filter, and as well as a little drop checker in there as well. And yeah, now I'm just gotta wait for it to grow out a little bit more and transition over from that dry start method. With the dry start method, you kind of set yourself up for a little bit of success because it does remove a lot of those nutrients from the aqua soil. If you don't know, aqua soil has ammonia in it to cycle the tank, and when you do the dry start method, it should cycle the tank a little bit as well as get rid of that ammonia, or at least some of it. It probably didn't get rid of it all, so for the first little bit, this tank will be a little unstable. For the first week on a usual tank, I'd be doing about a 50% water change every single day. For this tank, I'm probably gonna do one every second day, and then the next week every third day, and then once a week after that, just to kind of help this tank get set up in the beginning. For the lights, I'm using the Chihiros WRGB 2. These are great lights and I've used them many times before and love them. And I'm going to be running it 6 hours a day at 90% red, 70% green, and 100% blue. Usually I run them a little bit lower on the green spectrum, but this tank has a lot of green plants that I really want to make pop as well, so I've got that green higher than I usually do. This first week is probably mainly going to be dialing in the CO2, and for that I use a drop checker. A lot of people have questions about how much CO2 they need to add to a tank, you know, how many bubbles per second, and none of those are really a good estimate. CO2, the amount you need to add, is really tank dependent based on your KH and the pH of your water. And what these little drop checkers do is they read that for you and tell you when it's in the optimal range. So I'm just going to keep messing around with my CO2 until it's green by the time my lights turn on, and it stays green throughout the whole day. That's kind of the goal with CO2, and sometimes it's kind of hard to find that balance. And with this tank, I'm a little bit nervous about that because I am using Cyreuse stone, which does release some carbonate hardness. What is it again? It's something that will affect the KH pretty much, and when your KH rises, it's going to take more CO2 to get your CO2 to an optimal level pretty much. So the first couple months of this tank are also going to be pretty difficult, mainly because of this Cyreuse stone. With Cyreuse stone, it releases carbonate hardness, like I mentioned, so carbonates and bicarbonates, and this will slowly raise up my KH, affecting my pH and my CO2. And with that, changes in CO2 and fluctuations will come blackbeard algae, which I'm not too excited about, so I may have to do water changes on this tank a little more frequently than I normally would for the first couple months, especially because there's a lot of Cyreuse stone in here and it is such a small tank. Apart from that, I am super happy with this scape, and I wouldn't change my choice of Cyreuse stone because I think it looks super good in here, and I really can't wait for this tank to grow out. I hope you guys learned something new in this video and found it enjoyable. It was probably a shorter video, but yeah, it wasn't the highest production value. I was just kind of, you know, saying whatever came to mind, changing it up a little for a scaping video. But anyways, this was KalemsFishtanks. I hope you guys enjoyed and learned something new. Peace.